that use the cultural norms and that you have as your platform to speak to the world. Because by imitating, which is what we do when we have false consciousness, we simply follow the crowd. We don't contribute to the world, the global lore, right? The global lives community. We simply copy, imitate, and become parrots, right? And so
Welcome to another episode of the Nana Yayabua podcast. Today's episode is very special and dear to me because it picks or digs deeper into roots, into identity, who we are as Africans here in the diaspora. And also for the Africans back home, it digs into what we have, for some reason, forgotten about who we are as rooted people in Ghana or the rest of the continent. So I have with me my brother, Kwasi Konadu. His name itself bears a lot of meaning. What is the saying? What is it in a name? So he's going to dig through for us. But before then, let me give you a little brief about my brother, Kwasi Konadu. Kwasi Konadu is a professor of history at the
University, professor,
Colgate
yeah,
University.
of African
Yes.
history and Africana studies.
Okay, good. The reason why I'm saying good is that I was reading from one of his books, Transatlantic Africa. So when you read that bio, it says University of how do we call it? The City University of New York. But as life transitions and we move on, he's moved on to Colgate and he's doing many more. Importantly for me is that he's written about our narratives as Africans. Um, he is the author of Indigenous Medicine and Knowledge in African Society, A View from the East, Education and Cultural Nationalism in New York, the Akan Diaspora in the Americas. Yes. Um, your friend is saying, Akan Pioneers, African Histories, Diasporic Experiences, and the Akan People, a documentary reader. The Ghana Reader, History, Culture, Politics. Thank you for doing. And you're also the founding director of the non-profit educational published group Diasporic Africa Press Inc. People, if I say I'm talking about this man, it will take us till thy kingdom come. So I am going to pause there so we can listen to the message he has with us. And what didn't come out is that you are also a healer. Aside from being a teacher, you're a healer, a dream interpreter, many things. Many things. And it's
Thank you.
Dr. Kwasi Konadu.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
I guess I'll start with a quick background. And thank you for the introduction. You're very generous. So hopefully you and your viewers get something valuable out of our time together on this podcast. So I'll start with my background, which is not a very typical background. So as someone hearing or reading, my name will automatically think that I was born in Ghana, West Africa, but I wasn't. I was born on the island of Jamaica, and um, my parents and their ancestors, particularly my mother's lineage, which is my Abusha, my mother's line have a lot of healers in the lineage. But more importantly, they also hail from the Maroon community of Akompong, which is in the western part of the island of Jamaica. And immediately, your viewers who know anything about the Akan peoples or the Akan Chi language will see similarities between Akompong, Akropong, Nyankopong, and so on, right? And so
Yes.
a Maroon settlement, for the viewers that are unfamiliar, is a liberated or free community of African peoples who did not live under enslavement during the period of transatlantic slavery, right? And so my folks, they come from that community, and ultimately they come from what is now Ghana, West Africa, formerly the Gold Coast, with these contiguous areas. For example, the what is now Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, or Togo and Benin to the east. And so in this broad stretch of the Gulf of Guinea, um, my ancestors in particular come from the Akan peoples, and some come from actually what is the Fon Yoruba people as well, but most of the Akan people. And so my great grandmother, her name was Ajua Kunadu, and that's how I got my name, right? So my name came more so through passing down, if you will, rather than being born in Ghana. But obviously, when we're born, certain things are born in us that we have no control over. And so a child doesn't name itself. The parents and whatever spiritual forces that are around are also part of that package. And so I was named and I was born into that family of healers, and I was born into that family of Maroons and freedom fighters, and I was born into this very early passion for African history, which started personally because I began doing a research project as an undergraduate, 18-year-old, working on my family history. And so I began interviewing my aunties, my great aunts, my elderly people in my family. I began doing archival research. I began doing oral history at 18 years old on my own. And that essentially dovetailed into the professional sort of academic work that I do as a historian of Africa and its worldwide communities.
Wow, as an 18-year-old, I will tell you that you were wiser than many 18-year-olds, because I remember when I was 18 years old and I finished high school in Ghana, I was just excited to be out of there.
Hmm.
But one of the things that, when I was 17 years old, my older sister who lived in New York came to Ghana, and she was a grad student in, I forgot which university. So she came on a journey of, say, self discovery. So that was the first time I went to Cape Coast Dungeon. I don't call it castle because it's not one, it's a dungeon. And that's where I first had that experience with the brothers and sisters who were taken forcefully off the continent into the diaspora. But after that, there was no sense of what happened next. Um, what I mean to say is that later on, when I sat in class, because I went to school in the Cape Coast area, Holy Child, and the classroom was on the third floor, and where I used to sit, you could see the seas far away, and occasionally you could see a ship on
Hmm.
there. So this called to me that how did it feel that forcibly removed and taken off till wherever that you have no longer um connection with your ancestry, then coming to North America and seeing some people, and it's like, you look like somebody who comes from my family, you look like somebody. So in my mind it became like distant cousins, of which family true perhaps that we all branched from. And that put me back into digging back into Ghana history, the history of African people, the West Coast that was brought here, and the enlightenment that came with it. So, thank you so much for what you do, because it is very necessary, it is very important. As in, if you don't know your history, you are lost. So, what's in a name? So, let's come to what's in a name, your name.
Sure. So Kwesi is the name for any male born on a Sunday among the Akan peoples, from the, as you mentioned, the coastal Fanti dominated but not solely area, up until the Bonon Techimai region in the north of Kumasi, which is the capital of the Asante region. So this wide stretch from the coast to the central part of the forest, central Ghana, you have predominantly, but not solely, various but overlapping Akan peoples. And I want to make very clear to your audience that the Akan language is a composite language. As you mentioned, I think you now set up that there is the Fanti, Bono, Asante, Akwepem, but these are not different languages. They are mutually intelligible. Basically, what it means is that you and I can understand each other 85% or more of our speaking and listening. That makes a language mutually intelligible, much like Spanish and Portuguese, or Spanish and Italian, or French and Italian. The vocabulary, the structure, the grammar is the same, but there's some tonal or phonetic sound differences, right, that are stressed differently. But for the most part, they're a composite language. So the Akan composite language has a wide spread. Of course, Akan culture has a wide and domineering force within the Republic of Ghana. And so Kwesi, if you're in a forest, it's Akwesi. If you're in the coast, it's spelled usually with an E. That is Kwesi. Whereas Konadu, which is the family name, that name comes from my great grandmother, Aja Konadu, as I mentioned previously.
Thank you. So Kwasi is born on a Kwasiada, which is a Sunday born male. And
Now, quick correction though, I'm not born on Kwesiada. I'm actually born on Muno Kwesi because the Akan has their own calendar called the Adadjenine of 42 days.
yes.
And so I'm born on every day has a name and its meaning. So I'm born on Muno Kwesi, which is a fresh new Sunday.
Yo, but I don't know whether I was born on a fresh new Thursday. All I know is that I was born on Yawoda.
Yeah.
And Memrane Eye Bosu. Bosu is June.
Yes. I can tell you, maybe once we're finished, I'll email you the particular day you're born on. All needs your date of birth. I can tell you the exact day you're born on the account calendar.
Yo, Mate.
Yeah.
Hey,
I actually have an app that I'm working on that will give people this information and more based on their names.
yes.
So I'll do that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So you learn, you teach. Yes, so Kwesi has learned and is also going to teach me. But this also brings me to many of us say we call ourselves Akans or rooted, but we've lost the true meaning of some of the words, Akan words, because it's been infiltrated so much by English, or we do not use the original words. We've quote unquote brophilized it. Is that yes? Which saddens me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that means that we lose the true meaning of a word. And I keep telling people that, for instance, the word brony doesn't mean white.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The original meaning here, obi odi abro, which is a wicked person, because the collective saw what was being done. So it is way or your brony. But with English and people not being able to pronounce it properly, so I saw way a bruni. Even for myself, if I go to Ghana and I start speaking or behaving a certain way, they will refer to me as bruni, not intent as the color or behavior, but not the true behavior of how the people were. All these books that you've written, let's go to the Ghana reader. What influenced you to write the Ghana reader for us?
Sure. So Duke University Press, which published the reader, has a series called World Readers, where countries like Peru, Ecuador, Mexico, Brazil, and so on, they're well represented in that series. But when it came to Africa at the time that we did the Ghana reader, there was only one reader on Africa, which was a South Africa reader. And so I made a proposal to Duke University Press to add the Ghana reader. And hopefully that would spur or encourage further readers on African nations or African countries, such as the South African reader that had just been published. And so the inspiration for doing the Ghana reader was firstly to have something that was authoritative, comprehensive, but easily digestible that people could take with them on a trip, whether you are a Fulbright student or a study abroad student or a business person or a returnee, that is, you're from the Ghanaian homeland, or you're just someone who's interested in Ghana and the peoples and places and cultures that make that their home. The Ghana reader satisfies all these, appetites, and it brings together in one place 500 years of history, culture, and politics in a way that I haven't seen anyone else do. So the Ghana reader is really a great reference and resource, but it's also a place that gives you, a very digestible content because we use excerpts, primary sources that range from, again, politics. For example, it looks at elections, it looks at football, which is soccer in the world. It looks at hip hop in Ghana, the recent phenomenon of carnival. It looks at Ghanaian cuisine, geography, politics, the historical understandings that are important to shaping, who and the Ghanaian people are and how they came to be. So it's a great resource, in my view, that was necessary, and hopefully it gives itself, a lot for people to chew on who have an interest in Ghana and its peoples.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the core components of my podcast is the power of storytelling because schooling in Ghana, most of the literature that I read was Chinua Achebe. So that was actually, let me revert. Before Chinua Achebe, we were reading Jane Austen. I was reading about fall that I had no business. I had no idea. I was reading about snow that I had no idea what it was until I migrated here. Then I got to see, oh, this is fall. This is. But when the Chinu Achibes and Ama Ata Edus were introduced, they spoke a language we understood. They described sceneries that were comprehensible to us. And so the core of this podcast was to be able to tell stories from our point of view, exactly what you're doing. Now, how can this foster decolonization of the African mindset?
That's a great question. So, one of my favorite writers, which was a name, is Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And so Ngugi wa Thiong'o has a book called Decolonizing the Mind, right? And in it, he tells quite a number of stories, including offering analyses, perhaps from a slightly Marxist perspective, but nonetheless, that book, I think, is an important book that he, as a writer, as a person who produces literature, I recommend that book to begin with. But in my view, the ways in which African-based and African, world stories can decolonize, that is basically dethrone the sort of, cultural codes and social norms that have been baked into our heads through schooling primarily, but also through religious institutions, also through the curricular that comes through the governmental agencies, and also these extra non-governmental agencies that set up clinics, hospitals, and other kinds of organizations in places like Ghana, but not exclusively. That all of these actors, they have a part in shaping, the people's consciousness because they have their own agenda, they have their own propaganda, and everyone has propaganda. Ghanaian government has propaganda. The U.S. government has propaganda. Everyone has propaganda. So propaganda is a nasty word. It's just that when the propaganda does not suit the best interest and the well-being of the recipients, then that becomes a problem, right? And African stories or Africa-based stories and African world stories are important because what I think, and this is why we started Diasporic Africa Press in 2010, when my daughter Ifia was born.
Hey,
And so that's the reason we started Diasporic Africa Press, to infiltrate and populate the world with Africa-based stories that were not simply about, cowering and being ashamed of African cultural norms and forms, but being more standing on them as platforms, right? Because one of the things that I rate two Ghanaian philosophers that you probably know of and your audience may know of, the late Kwame Jechi, right, who passed away, used to teach at Legon, and Kwasi Konadu, who taught for a while in Florida. What I love about their work and what they've done is that they use Akan base, or in case broadly African concepts, to think philosophically, right? And they are the two most prolific and pronounced African philosophers of the 20th century. And so what I'm saying is that use the cultural norms and that you have as your platform to speak to the world. Because by imitating, which is what we do when we have false consciousness, we simply follow the crowd. We don't contribute to the world, the global lore, right? The global lives community. We simply copy, imitate, and become parrots, right? And so my argument is that we need not to be parrots because imitation can never be the real thing.
Yes.
So by being the real thing, by having what? Nutritious content and knowledges that, again, are rooted in African cultural norms and forms, the same that you felt enlivened by reading Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, or Amata Idu's work, or the poetry of Kwasi Konadu, right? When you read these kinds of works, you feel something that energizes you, that confirms who you are, and that gives you a sort of ethereal or moral boost. And then you speak to the world through your culture because the world will be able to say, hey, you contribute something that's not already here, right? You give it something new and something very nutritious. And that's why, in many ways, this is why in the last 15 years, African literature has become globalized, right? Think about the work of Chimamanda, right?
Yeah, Chimanda.
Nigeria. Her
Yes.
work is wonderful, but guess what? That work is built upon the newness that she brings through the African experiences that she had, right? And so and the cultural lens that she brings to bear, right? So that's really my contention is that by fostering and having cultural norms and forms that of course change over time, but they remain resilient by speaking to the world through those norms, through literature, through visual arts and other media. That's what we contribute to the world. Imitation to me doesn't contribute anything. It simply follows a crowd that leads to a sort of a cultural death, which is what false consciousness provides.
The reason why I am smiling so much is that my background, I'm a nurse and labor and delivery. So I have a patterned way of encouraging women to push.
Mhm.
And many times I've been told I sound like I'm singing when I do that because I realize that there's a rhythm. And many of them do the count. I don't do count. I do a rhythmic push, push, and then yes. So then there's a difference in how I approach my nursing in general versus how others approach it, and it's very, very stark because I do a mind body so holistic. When you come in, I'm looking at you. What is your story? Talk to me. Whereas other people, it's like, you know what, you came, just let me do this, and then you go. So that's why I was smiling because you were speaking my language. Thank you.
And thank you. By the way, my mother is a nurse, and so I can definitely relate.
And you know, Ghanaians to say antiness or jiawo. It's like they will just rename you and
Mhm.
forget about your name. Yes. All right. Now let's move on to spirituality because I know the African art is not an art that is, for instance, what is on the wall is just on the wall, but it's an art that speaks to, is lived, and African art, spirituality, and present day. I'm not sure with your thoughts on quantum physics and a
Mhm.
sense of knowing.
Sure. So I do know a bit about quantum physics, chaos theory.
Yes.
I'm a bit of a nerd, so I read widely because I'm curious, just like you, right? And I hope your viewers are curious too. So
How
out of
did you
my,
know?
I am very curious, and so yes,
Mhm.
what I found is this: is that African philosophies, right, African cosmologies, because these
Yeah.
cosmologies, basically thoughts, ideas, and lived experiences with the cosmos, right? That these philosophies and cosmologies, that they're living organisms. They're not simply something you put in a shelf or put in a museum to say, "Oh, that's very nice," or "That's wonderful." And that's what I think about African art is that they're embodiments of particular cosmology and philosophy that can be felt, that can be visualized, that can touch your spirit in a certain way, right? they can also speak to you in a certain way, in a language that you can understand without moving your mouth. And so African art, philosophies, and cosmology to me are braided, right? They're tightly bound and braided. I can't separate them. They're not simply decorative, even though they offer a visual feel and look, just like the artwork in your background on the wall. But that artwork right now, the face I'm seeing, it speaks to me. There's a certain language, right? There's a certain lexicon or vocabulary that's there. And there's also what a spirituality that's there, because it's a human being that touched something, some material, whether it's wood, metal, a canvas, and their spirit in that moment of creation is in that work. And that spirit, of course, vibrates, right? It has a certain frequency, quantum physics, right?
Yes.
That matter can't be destroyed. It only can be reconstituted and reshaped, which means energy is the same. It can't be destroyed. It has to be what? Refashioned, remolded. And that's what artists do. That's what African philosophers do, like Kwasi Konadu and Kwame Jetty, when they transform Akan concepts, right? Like Inkrabia or destiny and the like. And they provide a framework for us to think about how to live as human beings and what is the value and the cost of not living righteous and living well, right? And so to me, the art and philosophy cosmologies, again, are tightly bound, tightly braided, and they allow us in a way to decolonize, because that artwork, that philosophy, that cosmology is speaking to us from a certain cultural platform that gives us something new to work from. The same way that you will hum rhythmically. That is a way of nursing that's supplying health and care that is nutritious for that expecting or first time or second time or third time mother, in a way that the nursing textbooks don't allow. Which means those mothers are deprived of that experience through your right, your vocal resonance, right? Because your spirit is speaking to her.
Yes.
Or something is speaking through your spirit to her, communicating that something she needs, right? And we know that the voice is not only a beautiful, mechanism, it also transmits energy, right? And so, to me, the spirituality, cosmology, and philosophies and art, they are so tightly bound and braided. To separate them, that's when you lose the meaning. It becomes simply just an object, a thing.
Yes. Yes. As you speaking to that, I it was just recently that I really delved into, for instance, my last name Yabua, and really came to understand the true meaning that without conscious thought, I was already living that
Mm,
name. Yes. But then when it became really conscious to me, it's like, oh, okay. Because even the ya, which is due, when people come around me, they feel calm, settled.
mm,
Yes, obosu, and early morning dew is calm, settled on leaves and whatnot. Yes, until um, how do I put it? Anyways, let me cut it short. So it
mm,
was later on in life that I got to realize that I was living the true meaning of my name without even um, knowing it.
mm,
Right, so that is part of the cosmology that you speak about and the spirituality that comes with it. And then having some people call you abrewa yebua. Abrewa, if you don't know the meaning, guys, it's old woman.
yeah.
So they've already conferred to you a
Mm,
role which is imbued with wisdom, which
mm,
means that you also walk in that path, whether
mm.
you are aware of it or not. So it's a whole host of, and then coupled with the title. Then you're gonna go fair.
Go for it. Yes, yes. And by the way, for your viewers,
Yeah.
that is a wonderful title and compliment to call you Abrewa, because it's not simply woman, old woman. It's the ancient ancestress,
Yes.
right? And there's a cosmology, right? Abrewa and Nsuma, right? The old woman
And then
and the
Suruma.
children.
Yes.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that confers of, again, cosmology and spirituality baked into
Hmm.
your name.
Yes.
It gives you a certain kind of what pilot light to say, this is how I'm going to walk this path in life, and it's baked into your name.
Now that leads me to purpose. Since you've already we've alluded to that, let's talk about having a purpose in life? I think that's one of the questions I was going to ask you, that what is it for you? You've talked about purpose in reference to the press, but let's come to the other aspect of your life,
Mhm.
work and business. What is purpose? What does it mean for you?
Sure. Well, purpose is baked into the very circumstances of my birth. I'm born in the evening, so like you, I'm also pretty cool and calm. I'm an evening baby, and when you're born does matter. I also have a chart on the day I was born, the month, the day, and what alignment of the stars, meaning the planets. I have
Mm-hmm.
there's a chart. I forgot how I got it, but there's a chart that I have on the very time that I was born. And again, this is going back to African cosmology, philosophy, and art, because all these forces that align with us. For me, it's very humbling when it comes to purpose. Is that we are very small in the cosmos, we human beings, right? We're important, but we're very small when it comes to the forces and energies at play. We understand very little, and know even less. And that humility for me is what pushes me. So, in terms of what I can tell of my human purpose, my mortal purpose, is that one of my main purposes here is to, educate, and by way of knowledge production and dissemination. Hence the press, hence the professor, hence the work that I do with community centers and organizations. Do a lot of work with a lot of community organizations, both in West Africa, in Brazil, in the Caribbean, other parts of the world. And the press is, and again, another vehicle to do that. Another part of my work here is healing, which is also part of teaching. And so when I work with clients, I make sure that I'm also teaching them about why we do something this way, not that way. What is the ritual consequence of not abiding by these rules? Or what does it mean to do this and not to do that? Or why do we fast these many days? Or why those plant medicines? Let's say plant medicine like Hrintia, or um, it could be mahogany or kuroba. It could be a range. It could be why the bark, not the roots. Why the leaves, right? Why do we, bathe with an egg? So there's a number of ways that I use, the apparatus of healing to also educate.